So this is pretty much part 2 of what is the most important thing in life. The first one was about the conservation of sexual energy. And this next one is pretty much going to be about eating habits. I'm no doctor, no guru, no therapist, no dietitian or anything. I'm just a guy sharing his perspective, leaving an archive of his perspective on YouTube and TikTok for his 1-year-old nephew, because life is strange and who knows, maybe I won't be around to share that with him. So that's pretty much what all this is. To be doing different videos and different topics, philosophy, existence, just different things. I don't know. So if you're interested, stay tuned in. If you're not, it's all good. And let's talk a little bit about fasting. Yeah, so fasting, I think, is an extremely necessary way to look at food, if nothing else. What do I mean by that? I personally don't know how intelligent it is to be obsessed with it, to take it as an ideological standpoint and aim towards some sort of fasting goal. When I think about it, and this is how I think about pretty much anything I talk about. It's not something to do to attain enlightenment, which is a fallacy in my opinion, or because enlightenment just means clarity. So whatever you think you've attained is some abstract ideal. It's not, clarity of mind is much more simple. But you don't, in my opinion, fasting is not about attaining or goals, or, it can be, I suppose, but in a very natural, simplistic sense, and taking all the complexity out of it, at least for me in my brain, fasting is just what nature has evolved this body to be able to endure. What I mean by that is our ancestors, way, way back, didn't always have food. They couldn't always catch food, they couldn't always find food, and sometimes they had to go without food and water. And one might say, yeah, they did that because they couldn't, but if they had to, they would have eaten all the time. They would have eaten 3 square meals a day like we can. I don't know, maybe, but that's kind of an irrelevant point, because the point is they didn't eat every day, and our bodies evolved from that. So our bodies don't actually need to eat every day. And deeper than that, unless you have some sort of physiological issue, like type 1 diabetes, for example, you do have to be very mindful of what you're eating, when you're eating, and stuff like that. But even then, I found that fasting is possible so long as you're very, very, very careful. And I'm not advising anyone to do anything. I'm just speaking about my experiences in this world. Fasting can change your perspective of a lot of things, especially eating and food. What is food? How we use food generally is as a comfort. It's a pastime. You never ask someone if they're hungry and they go like this. I could eat. And I'm not saying I've never done that. I definitely have. But it's very interesting, right? You ask someone if they're hungry, this physiological urge, and they sit and they think. So what does that mean if they have to think about if they're hungry? A hungry man is hungry. There's absolutely no space for questions. The thinking is a remembering of something tasty, in my opinion, in my observation of myself and people. It's a remembering of, basically what one is saying is, yeah, I could change my physiology right now. I could go for a shift in perspective, because when you're eating that food, it tastes good, and it changes the chemistry of your physiology for a moment, and you're not thinking about your life, and you're not thinking about stress and all these things. You're absorbed in the pasta, you're absorbed in the pizza, in the crunchies, in the candy. Basically what you're saying is, yeah, I could numb out for a little bit, even though there's no hunger, there's no physical hunger, and maybe you just ate, or maybe you ate not too long ago, you know what I mean? Like, there's no attending to the actual body. We're just doing things because it's a conditioning programmed response. We eat all the time. We eat all the time, and we don't have to. And it's interesting too, because if this kind of more natural perspective of food and our relationship to it were to go mainstream, so to speak, there's a number of different issues in relation to this, but we wouldn't need as much food. We wouldn't be going to the grocery store every single week, because we would have the foods that we have and we would eat them sparingly, and it would last so much longer. But instead, we've been conditioned to eat all the time, and we run out of food very quickly. And I'm in a space of really questioning that and changing my habits, which is, I can tell already, is going to have a foundational difference in my budgeting. I'm not going to need to go shopping every week, every 2 weeks. It might be longer, depending on the foods that I buy. So it's interesting because fasting can change wallet issues, budgeting, and it'll change your body. I mean, because of diet. I think generally our relationship to food is trash. We eat without any reason at all. And it's imperative for someone growing up in this world to question that, because you'll just be conditioned to do the same exact thing. But you don't have to. And that's another main thing about this channel, is there's more than one way to live. And though our culture will really strongly push you in a specific direction, unfortunately, there's more than one way to go about life. And having a different relationship to food than everyone else, it will be a little bit of a struggle. But in the end, I imagine it will be very worth it. Fasting, if you've never fasted, it'd probably be best to just skip one meal. If you're used to eating 3 meals, do no snacks and go from there. Then go to 2 meals, then go to 1 meal. And just see. There's no hard and fast rule. Just experiment with it. That's what it is, experimentation, because it all depends on your physiology and your life. But you be the scientist and you experiment. Well, what happens if I actually don't eat all the time? What happens when I get this hunger pang, but I don't listen to it? Or I just drink some water? Like, what happens? Do I fall out immediately, or do I actually feel energized somehow after I go through those withdrawal periods? Because there will be withdrawal periods, just like when you engage in sex all the time, there's going to be withdrawal periods, because these are real drugs to the system. What happens? Keep a log, or don't keep a log. Just observe. That's the most important thing. Observe. Truly. Attend to it. Like you're in the woods and you have to survive and you have to pay attention to everything. Observe yourself in the same way. Your daily living. Observe that. Because that is what's most important. Daily living is what's the most important thing. I should have said that in the beginning. But daily living is what's most important. And when you have something like fasting and something like conservation of sexual energy, not in your toolkit, because I don't think they're tools on the side of life. I think fasting and conservation of sexual energy is living. It is living. And the way we've been conditioned is a dissipation and a corruption of living. And when you attend to these things, these necessary things for survival, and you see them not from a spiritual or religious or attainment standpoint, but from just like nature. What does a tree need to grow? What does a human need to grow? It's the same exact thing. When you attend to these things, things change in your life without effort. That's the biggest thing, because most people will push you towards willpower. Use 100% of your will to get to your goals, to achieve this, to get her, to get him. And I think that's bullshit. I think it is. It's not about that. You only need about 10% will The rest of it, 90%, is just seeing the danger. I like to use the simple example of the stove being on. Maybe you know the stove's on, maybe you know it's hot, and maybe you've been told not to touch it. But for some reason, you still touch it. The touching, the feeling, the burning, when you really feel it, and there's no question of what led to that feeling, you will never touch a hot stove again. Not on purpose, ever again. And it's the same for life. When you see the hurting, the pain of overindulging in food, what it does to the body and the mind together, when you see the dissipation of sexual energy, what it does to the mind, the body, and the world around you, because the sexually dissipated human being also has an effect on the individuals out there, necessarily, because we're all related, everything is related. When you see that danger, that damage, that hurt, how the sexualization of people is objectifying and damaging to the child that you want to raise up in this world, or the friend that you have that you claim to love, sexualization of everyone hurts everyone. People don't want to look at that because they don't want to get rid of this pleasure, but it's the case. I can't imagine I don't have children, I can't imagine bringing a young woman into this world, a girl, and being the kind of guy who checks out every single girl he passes by. I can't understand that. I'm supposed to raise her in a world where I objectify what she's going to be when she grows up. I subtly allow that to be a part of her world. I raise her to be in a world where men just want her for her body and care nothing about the beauty that she is. I can't fathom that. I've never been able to fathom that. And so it didn't turn out to be this way, but I've now come to a place where I can see why I couldn't fathom that, and it's because the sexualization that we live with as if normal is not. It's conditioned. But it doesn't actually have to be that way, but you have to be interested in finding out another way to live. And there is a way to live where you're not so sexually oriented. I'm not saying you're repressing yourself, because that's a problematic thing too. But when you see the damage and you actually care without caring at the same time, because both are true, you care so much. I found I can care so much about people and the world and proliferation of life and things that matter, and I also don't care because I'm not here to save the world or change the world, and I can't. All I can do is control this, and this has a necessarily profound effect on that, because it's related, on that being the world. Changing this is changing the world. There's no changing the world to change this. That's a fallacy, and that's how we actually operate in politics and everything like that. We say, let's change that. But what's here is a mess. So whatever plans I construct, I can fathom, are made of mess. The plans are messy plans. And so I put them out into the world, and it might stick for a moment, but it just gets messier and messier and messier. So the change happens here. And that's not some motivational, not actually, forget trying to change the world. Changing this is changing the world, because the individual is the world. It's necessarily the case. You can observe that. I'm not special. I'm not a scientist. You can observe that in your life. And two fundamental, unmistakable things is one's relationship to food and sex energy. And to observe those things in your life is to fundamentally change a lot without trying to change anything. Effortless change. But really serious attention at the same time. It's not about trying not to do anything. You want to eat those chips? Eat the chips. But how do you feel? You want to engage in the pseudo option, which is ridiculously nonsensical. PORN, porn. If you want to engage in that, engage in it. But how do you feel? And do you see those human beings on the screen? And how complex their lives are? And how fucked up their lives had to have been to get them in that space on that screen for you to view and never meet. You'll never meet them, but you're giving your energy. Think about that. It doesn't make any sense, and we've been conditioned to think it makes sense. It doesn't. I'm here to tell you, it doesn't. It really doesn't. Don't give your energy to a person you'll never meet, who does not care about you, and who is dealing with so much. They've either been tricked or conned, explicitly or subtly, to perform for you on camera. It's a really fucked up situation. Yeah, I should probably cut this by now. Yeah, so since I'm still trying to find my tone for this channel, if I've said anything that piqued your interest and you're like, whoa, talk about that more, please share it in the comments. That would be greatly appreciated. And otherwise, I'll just keep kind of making videos that I think I would want to share with my 1-year-old nephew, and anyone else who cares to listen. So, appreciate you, and ponder, think, be serious. Be serious about your life. Be playful, but don't be afraid to be serious. If there's one thing I could share, it's that. It's okay to be serious.